Hello, everyone, and welcome to Intimacy with the World podcast. I am Dorita Holm, your host on this show, where we explore what really matters to live a meaningful life. And today, my guest is Dr. Mario Martinez. He is a clinical neuropsychologist, and in 1998, he founded the Biocognitive Science Institute, where he has developed a theory of mind body culture, which he calls biocognition, which we will, of course, talk more about today. And this theory evolved from his research in psychoneuroimmunology. Immunology, that's not an easy word. Cultural neuroscience and cultural anthropology. Mario has written several books, The Man from Autumn and the bestseller The Mind Body Code, and his latest book is The Mind Body Self, about how to challenge the beliefs that limit our health, longevity, and success. And I believe he is working on a new book about longevity. So, Mario, welcome to Intimacy with the World podcast. I'm so happy that you're here.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
So these past 10 days or so, I have very much enjoyed your latest book, The Mind Body Self. And I am really excited to speak with you about some of the ideas that you write really very eloquently about, because it's quite complex what you're writing about. It's not an easy task. And your work spans across multiple disciplines, really, or areas of research. And that is what makes it so interesting, I think. But it also makes it more difficult for me to know where to start, because there are so many different threads in your work that so beautifully weave together into a whole. And really, I suppose that is the essence of your work, wholeness, no? How can we come into wholeness in our body, mind, and spirit? So would it be correct to say that you are interested in this intersection and mutual influences between the mind, the body, and the culture that we live in?
Yes, and I think you're right. What happened was that any good science comes from frustration, from seeing the limitations that it has. And I realized that psychology wasn't going to explain everything, or neuroscience, or psychoneuroimmunology, or anthropology. So I thought that it had to be a convergence of disciplines, like a meta paradigm, to
Yeah.
be able to explain the complexity of who we are. And this is why I believe that psychological testing, most of the psychological tests are junk science. It's just not, they peg you into something and then you live up to that expectation. So when I work with organizations and leaders, and we don't do any psychological testing, we don't do anything like that, because all it does is it pegs people. And in order for us to be able to relate to people, we always want to peg them. We always want to identify them. A doctor always wants to find something wrong with you so they can reduce their anxiety. Okay,
Yeah.
now, oh, bipolar affective disorder. Now I can relax. But if they don't know what's wrong, then or who you are, then there's this um, uncertainty, and people are very, very uncomfortable with uncertainty. Uncertainty is my best friend.
Yeah.
So I navigate uncertainty with chaos as my guide, and that's how you have to deal with it. So it's really bringing culture, mind, and body together. So in science, what I'm proposing is that mind and body are not enough. Mind and body do not communicate in a vacuum. They communicate in a cultural context, and the brain is cultural and the immune system is cultural. So it's complex, but once you know the dynamics, then you can speak the language.
Yeah. So you use a lot of specific words in your book. I'm not going to use those in this interview because people are not going to know what they mean, like biocognition and all these words. But I find really interesting what you're saying. When I studied social anthropology, and it was for the same reason, Mario. It was like, what is a human being? What is a human being really? And I find it so interesting. And of course, in anthropology, you look at different cultures and then you compare and see where are the similarities and what's different. So I find very interesting what you're saying, that our immune system is cultural and that our brain is cultural. Can you explain how can our immune system be cultural?
Okay. I like complicated questions, so it's good. Thank you. Uh, well, when the best way, if you say, how can an immune system be culture? Well, of course, then the reductionist scientists will say a cell responds to different environments and so forth, but it's not that. It's just that when before we had consciousness, we responded reflectively, just a reflex here, reflex there. We didn't have a language, we didn't have a past, present, or future. It was a very limited cognition conscious. But then when we started burying our dead and when we started creating trinkets that didn't have any value, that meant that consciousness came in.
Yeah,
That,
when we're
that
talking
we
about
had
human evolution here.
that's right. So it meant that when you bury somebody, and the reductions would say, well, you're burying people for hygienic reasons. No, they were buried with important items that they had in their lives, so they could go into another world. So in order to think that way, you have to have a very complex cognition
Yeah.
that requires a language. So then language comes, and before we had a lot of epigenetic transfer, things that we pass from one generation to another, like a rat. You poison one rat, and when they go back to another rat and they groom, both rats will never take that poison, nor the offsprings. They had an epigenetic transfer. But now we don't need that. Now we can say, don't eat that. It's poison. So the language becomes then the communication that the brain needs to understand and the immune system needs to understand. So therefore, it's cultural. So for example, when you're born, you have a reflex to go to the breast or to the bottle. You're hungry, and you have a psychoneuroimmunology, which is the mind, body reacting together, and that feels like hunger. Okay, you don't have a language for that, and then you go to the breast, and you satiate the hunger. You're not hungry anymore, so you have a physiological reaction to that. Later, you find out, oh, this is breast, this is mother, this is this is that. But you already have a physiology, and then language and physiology become biosymbolic.
Yeah, they merge.
They merge. So this is why if someone says to you, "You're so stupid," and you see that as a shaming, your system will secrete molecules of inflammation.
Yeah.
As if that was some kind of pathogen. Why? Because we're a bioinformational field that includes biosymbols.
Yeah.
And we need that in order to survive.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting. And it's interesting how different cultures then the same thing can mean different things in different cultures. And you talk about in your book how, for example, the menopause, women's menopause is experienced is talked about, has a different meaning in Japan, for example, than in South America. Maybe you could and that's why the women in South America experience their menopause very differently than the women in Japan.
That's right. Yes, and that's a really good example of the biosymbols of culture. And in some places like Uruguay and Argentina, other places in South America, they call it bochorno, the shames. So when they have the hot flashes, they're having the shame. And even the doctors will say she's having symptoms of shame, even though they know it's hormonal. But you see, the culture will say that.
Yeah, it's
We know
amazing
now,
how they use that word, right? The
yeah, even
shame.
because medicine is cultural too. So then we know now, psychoneuroimmunology, by the way, is a big word, and it means how thoughts and emotions affect the nervous, immune, and endocrine system. So in psychoneuroimmunology, they studied more than just stress hormones. They started studying the inflammatory molecules. So shame causes inflammation.
Yeah.
So if a woman thinks that she's having the shames, she'll have more inflammation. Her self-esteem will go down. Her sexual drive will go down. Depression will increase, and hormonal imbalance will increase. So you would think, okay, that's just how it is. That's gynecology. Well, you go to, as you said, in Japan, and they call it kolenki, which means a second spring. There, women go into their beauty, to their wisdom, to their to the sense of meaning and belongingness. None of those symptoms are insignificant. Those symptoms, because of the interpretation of the culture.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an obvious good example for our listeners to understand what we're talking about. I mean, in one culture, it's called shame, bochorno, and in the other language, exactly the same thing is called second spring. I mean, what a difference in
That is right.
connotations we get.
That's right. Konenki or bochorno. Then you can choose. Now, the thing about biocognition, as you know, because you've been reading it very much, it's not an intellectual process. If it were intellectual, I could say, don't be depressed. Look at such a beautiful day.
Yeah.
Don't do cocaine, it's going to kill you. And people say, okay, I'll stop. It doesn't work that way because we learn things biosymbolically, mind, body, culture, and you can't just change it, but intellectually trying to work it out.
No,
And
and
many therapists will do that and they'll spend years.
yeah, and this is so important how these concepts, they're not just concepts, they actually live in our tissues. They
They're
actually
embodied.
live in our body. So even if you tell me, no, Dorita, it's not shame. In Japan, they call it second spring. Don't worry. It's not going to get to me. So I need to do, what do I need to do, Mario, to reprogram not just my mind, but my mind and my body? How can I do that?
Well, okay. You see, if a theory doesn't have an application, it's worthless.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you could talk about it. Oh, that's really nice. So what do I do? Well, I don't know. Talk to the universe. By the way, the universe is too busy expanding, so it's not going to buy you a new car or a new relationship. So I think you have to go into yourself, not to the universe. It doesn't watch your back. You watch your back.
Yes.
So, as you know, with the traveling you've done.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah. It's good to watch your own
yeah.
back.
So to answer your question, in biocognition, we don't change behavior. We change the terrain that maintains the behavior. So when you look at, for example, the shaming, you look at the terrain of shaming, which means that the terrain says loss of beauty, loss of sexuality, hormonal changes, all of that coming from a culture. So then we look for a terrain that's incompatible with that terrain. And we know now from the work that I've done is that honor is anti-inflammatory.
Yeah. And
So I
honor
work
would be like the opposite of shame.
the opposite of shame. And I've worked clinically with many cases of fibromyalgia and rheumatoid arthritis using shame consciousness. So what do you do then? For example, the change has to come at a contemplative level, more than relaxation, not hypnosis, just an observational, serene state.
Yeah.
And you do that, and then you bring in first your conception of what's going on. Okay, I'm having the shames now, and this is what I feel. You bring your culture in. This is what I'm feeling right now. Then you pay attention to it, and you give it a name. It's a cloud. It has to pass like a cloud, because cloud has a history of moving. If you say it's a brick has a history of not moving.
Yeah. So
So
you
you
let
give it
it
the
you let this cultural belief move through you and feel it in your body.
That's right. And then you have to bring in honor consciousness, but the brain needs evidence. So what you do is you ask yourself, let me bring a memory of a time that I was very honorable. When did I feel honorable? What did I do? Even if people didn't know about it, you did something honorable. How do you know honorable? Your chest goes out, shame goes in. So you know, your body will tell you. And once you bring the honor, then you bring honor consciousness without relating it to the other. You bring honor consciousness to that movement. So then anytime that you have the shames, you have konenki, but you have to embody the konenki, and you have to practice the konenki so that the brain can change the concept and say, okay, now I'm not having the shames anymore. I'm having some symptoms that are moving me into the second spring, and you embody. So embodiment is really important. So
Yeah.
you change the terrain, not the behavior.
Yeah, I think this word embodiment is really important that we get a good grasp of it, because it's actually quite a buzzword these days.
Yes.
Everybody's talking about embodiment, and I've heard the word embodiment for many years. And you know, I feel that it is a concept. It's almost hard to call it a concept, but that's deepening and deepening in me. I get a deeper and deeper understanding, and I imagine that there's no end to how far you can go in your integration of embodiment, of what that really means. So maybe you could give us a good explanation of what embodiment means, because we hear this word all the time.
Yeah. And these buzzwords, as you said, that there's embodiment and empowerment. Everybody talks about empowerment, and many people have no clue of what they are. So we have to have operational definitions of everything. So empowerment, for example, simply means access to resources to overcome a challenge. That's it. That's empowerment. Disempowerment or helplessness is no access to resources to overcome a challenge. And when it comes to embodiment, Merleau-Ponty had the best explanation. Is they have to look at it self in the world, not self and the world. So you begin to practice self in the world. You embody yourself in a world that is inseparable from you, and your physiology begins to respond differently. So an embodiment is a manifestation of what you're experiencing, what I call the felt meaning. So if I say I'm going to hit you over the head with a bat, that's a symbol. But if I hit you over the head, the pain is a felt meaning of getting hit over the head. So you have to have the felt meaning of the embodiment, but you have to look at yourself as self in the world. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And it has to be practiced, has to be cultivated
Yeah,
to
and
feel
that's
embodied.
why, and that's of course why if we want to make some of these changes, what we want to, when we talk about these transformations, we talk about bringing this transformation from our head to really have it live in our tissues, this in our body, no, these
Yes,
transformations, if we want to make some kind of work with ourselves.
yes. Because if some, say a patient, I don't call them patient anymore, I call them students, but
Yeah,
let's say a student comes and says, I'm very anxious. Oh, really? Where? Where are you anxious? Just anxious. Where are you anxious? It's just a disembodied construct that can't be resolved because it's up in the air. How do you experience anxiousness, shortness of breath, tight shoulders? Okay, that's your embodied anxiety. Now we can do something about that. But
yeah,
or people say, I'll say, how do you feel about how do you feel right now? I feel that I should go to church. Well, that's a thought. How do you feel right now? I feel that I should feel better. That's a thought. How do you feel right now? And you find, okay, I'm angry with you. Where do you feel it? My stomach. Okay, that's a feeling.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And that's actually much more efficient to work with the felt experience in the body than with the theoretical concept in your mind.
It won't change. That's right. Many theories work on that. If you understand something, you'll be able to change it. And you spend a lot of money twice a week for years. And you ask, how you doing? Oh, I'm doing better. How's your fibromyalgia? Well, it's getting better. How long have you been in therapy? 10 years. Waste of time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You, as a social anthropologist myself, I thought it was very interesting the way you talk about the consequences of going beyond the pale.
Oh,
Can
yeah.
you tell us a little bit more about that? You probably have to explain what going beyond the pale is. What's the
Yes.
pale,
Well,
and
it
what are the
has a negative
consequences?
connotation now. If people said she went beyond the pale, that's you did too much. But really, it's good if you. The pale is an old medieval word that means enclosure. So in those days, you needed to have the enclosure, the walls or whatever to protect you from the enemies and to protect you from animals and so forth. And within the pale, it was necessary to have a collective goal. Everything was for the collectivism. The pale has become now a cultural fishbowl. You're still in a pale. So when you want to get out of the pale and individuate, like Jung wanted or told us that we need to individuate to become who you are, it becomes incompatible with the collectivism of the pale. So when you go beyond the pale, you get punished in three different ways. I think from the cultures that I study, you get punished either by abandonment, betrayal, or shame, and you have to live with those one of those three or all three. And it comes very subtle. They'll say, you need to go to college. Okay, you go to college and they take care of your college, but then you need to come back. If you don't come back, you're too good for us. And then you start getting shamed or abandoned or whatever. So the personal journey of self requires working through the archetypal wounds to individuate.
Yeah.
And each of the archetypal wounds has a psychoneurological response.
Yeah.
The shame has a sense of immunological kinds of secretion of molecules, and there's some correlation between that and autoimmune illnesses. I've never seen a case of fibromyalgia without a shaming wound. So,
Yeah.
abandonment also has a certain consequences, but they each have their antidotes. And you work on the consciousness to create a terrain that makes it incompatible for uh, the archetypal wounds to grow. So I use a lot of the idea of the French medicine. They'll say, let's look at the terrain to see what the terrain is doing. Here in the US, it's very predatory. They want to take something out or they want to give you something and they have to do something rather than look at what needs to happen.
Yeah, but it's a very fine balance that, going beyond the pale. I mean, I went beyond the pale
Yeah,
I always
several
go
times.
beyond the pale, and it's difficult. I decided when I was 19 years old that I was going to sail around the world, and I got shamed everywhere. Who do you think you are? You're crazy. You can't do that. You're not going to get further than Scotland or whatever, And I came back 3 years later, and I had done it. But
Yeah,
even if I had done it, I was 3 years out there sailing and came back to my little islands, and then I was, of course, a hero. But even so, that shaming still sat in me. Like, you always have to keep yourself small when you're inside the pale, right? You
yes,
mustn't individuate, you mustn't stick out, you mustn't stand out.
that's right.
But at the
Even
same time, we also need community. We need community. We need to be supported by and accepted by our community to feel well and to contribute to society. So how do you see that balance?
well, that's important because we are social beings. We don't want to isolate ourselves forever, but we need
Exactly.
subcultures of wellness that support our outlier consciousness. So those subcultures of wellness are really important. That's what I try to create when I work with other people and countries and so forth. Create a subculture of wellness so that then you can be confirmed with your weirdness. And people can say, it's okay, you want to go around the world? Well, you better learn about navigation. And so it's not a naive way of looking at things, but it's a way of looking at what is your potential to do things in your life. But you can't go too far. You can become an outlier just to be an outlier.
Yeah,
What
that
an outlier does things to have meaning, not to be weird.
yes.
Because meaning is the key to everything.
Yes. And this brings me to, which I think is there are so many things that are so interesting in your book. But one of them is that goes way back to Aristotle and his friends. When you talk about we often hear people say we have to live in the moment, and I understand that when they say that, what they actually mean is that you have to just seek pleasure for the senses full out, as if there was no tomorrow. And what you're saying is that this hedonistic idea of living, of just seeking pleasure for pleasure's sake, is actually not the most healthy way to live. You speak about the hedonic and the eudemonic way of
Yes.
living.
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up because that's really important. And I'm doing a lot of work in that area now because it's bad for the immune system to be hedonic. And the most, I guess, extreme hedonism would be addictions. That's extreme hedonism. But Aristotle, about 2,300 years ago, said that that the hedonic life was not enough. That we needed more than that. That we needed pleasure, but we also needed, as you said, the eudemonic pleasure, which is pleasure with meaning and purpose.
Yeah.
Well, recently there's been a study that looked at how the immune system responds to that. And what they did is they divided groups into people that are mostly hedonic and people that are eudemonic. But eudemonic doesn't mean you're a caretaker. You don't take care of everybody. You take care of yourself, but it has meaning and it has purpose, and you find pleasure in meaning and purpose. So
Yes.
look how specific this is. There's something called CTRA. There are 21 genes in the immune cells that have to do with antibody, antiviral, inflammation. And they looked at the CTRAs of people who are hedonic and people who are eudemonic. The people who are eudemonic had a better CTRA response than the people who are hedonic. So you're ruining your health by just being hedonic.
Yeah,
So
I find this is absolutely fascinating, that to just seek pleasure without meaning and purpose is actually not good for the human. It shows up in our immune system. This is fascinating.
and even more, when they measured the level of pleasure that these people felt, there were no significant differences, but the immune system could tell the difference.
Yeah. So a human being needs purpose and meaning to thrive.
Yes. If you want to get someone sick in an organization, I do a lot of work with organizations, you do two things and they'll be sick within 6 months. And that's what they do with most organizations. That's why people get sick at work. You give them responsibility without authority, and you give them a job without any meaning. Why do I do this? Just do it. Don't worry about it. Does it have any purpose? No, just do it. They get sick. And most Successful executives have 75% of them have gastrointestinal problems or hypertension or stress-related kinds of problems because of what they're doing. And then there's over-identification with the job too. That's why I call selfing and unselfing. You have to do selfing and unselfing, which
Yeah.
is what the new book is about that.
Yeah. So are you saying then that if a CEO, for example, really felt that his work was extremely meaningful and that there was really had purpose for him, then he would not have these illnesses?
If they maintain the right archetype, because an example, Steve Jobs loved his work. He was a great visionary, but he couldn't get out of the visionary archetype. The archetypes are contextual. If you're a visionary and you love your work, then you have to, when you leave your work, you leave the visionary and you go become partner, lover, father, mother.
Yeah.
Because the system was made up that way.
Yeah.
For a hammer and a nail, and for a screwdriver, you don't need a hammer. You need a screw. Same thing. And the system breaks down when you're out of context in your archetype.
So are you saying that we need to live in more than just one archetype? We actually need to have a balance between our
Yes.
different archetypes. Like I'm a mother, I'm a writer, I'm a meditation teacher. You need to have
Yes.
a
And
balance
know how to
between. You
shift.
can't just live in one archetype.
No, because it would be like a hammer for everything.
Yes.
This is why Maslow said, if you look at the world with a hammer, you'll see nails everywhere.
Yes.
That's what happens.
Exactly.
So you when you look at self is a conglomerate. It's a hologram that is constantly flowing. And the reason that it works that way is because as Homo sapiens, we've been around like 150,000 years. And trial and error says for a child and a woman, the best archetype is the mother. You can't be a lover. You got to be the mother. So trial and error. So we know that the mother archetype is necessary. The culture will give it its own flavor, but the terrain of the mother is the caring of the child. That's how you care, the culture tells you, but it's still the caring.
Yeah.
So this is why we're made into multiple archetypes to be able to handle multiple situations.
Yeah.
So there's no self. The Buddhists say you knock and there's nobody home because there's no self. It's a process rather than an entity.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And this brings me to something else that I found very, very fascinating in your book, which is the bioethics. You write about bioethics, which I thought was extremely interesting, about how our body and immune system actually responds to moral and immoral behavior. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, because now that you know that the culture is embodied, and culture, as you know, anthropology spend hundreds of years, and culture simply is the collective beliefs that are shared about important things in life. Aesthetics, ethics, wellness, that's it, that's a culture. So the immune system has to pick up on that. It has to pick up on what are the important things. So we know that when you observe love or you experience love, your antibodies, IgA, go up, your neutrophils go up, everything goes up. When you experience a film of the Nazis committing atrocities, everything goes down and you're more prone to catching a cold because the IgAs, antibodies that go up, are the ones to protect you from upper respiratory. So actually I wrote an article about Corona on how to understand the coronavirus and how to protect yourself using IgA types of imagery and things. So then we have to have the moral that we create. And then that moral says, okay, this is prosocial, this is not prosocial. What's not prosocial, the immune system doesn't like. What is prosocial, it likes. So then it responds to why is it that honorable is anti-inflammatory? Honor it's a prosocial higher cognition. So that's how it works. So then in biocognition, bioethics is literally the moral of biology, not bioethics as euthanasia and philosophy. It's more than that. Bioethics is the morality of the immune system.
That's amazing that our immune system knows what is right and what is wrong across cultures. That our immune system knows that love is prosocial and hate is not prosocial, and the immune system will go down. I mean, that's
Yeah,
very
and
significant.
it is, and it doesn't pay attention to your feelings of feeling happy or whatever. You could be very happy hedonistically, but it's not, your immune system doesn't respond well to that.
No, it
So
responds to meaning and purpose on a prosocial level.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
and meaning and purpose has to have a sense of belongingness, a sense of joy, and a sense of companionship.
Yeah.
And, and that's something. If you want me to, I'll talk a little bit about the latest, what I call about the extended self.
Yeah, could I
Testing.
ask you one question before? You know,
Sure.
I, I mean, I meet a lot of people who actually don't feel a lot of meaning and purpose in their life.
Yeah.
And you know, to me, that's like the most, the worst problem one can have, because how would you tackle something like that? How do you speak to, so how do you try and help somebody who doesn't feel any meaning and purpose? They just can't see it or feel it.
Well, what you find is that people identify, when they don't have meaning, they identify with things or people. So they identify themselves with their work, with their title, with, but that's not meaning. That's just an identification. So first you have to find out, what is it that what do you identify with? What's important to you in life? They have something, eating or making love or whatever, but there's something. Or my title as VP, or my title as a general manager, that kind of identity. That has no meaning. That's happy, not joy. That's performance, not meaning. So you have to separate that and then find out what kind of, because there are three questions that you have to ask yourself, and it happens in relationships, and I'll tell you how we pull out once the relationship's not working, either because of death or unrequited love. Somebody says, you're no longer worthy, goodbye. Well, what do you do with that? Oh, I'll forget you. It doesn't work that way.
No.
So what happens is that we have to ask three questions. Who am I? What am I doing here? And who cares?
Very
So
easy questions.
that's right, very easy question. But
Like,
if you
who
say,
am I?
who am I? And people who don't have meaning, who am I? I am the vice president. What am I doing here? Producing. Who cares for me? The money that I make. That's it. So no good health there.
No, no, no.
But
And
if you,
how do you help somebody like that find meaning? How do you help them connect with their own meaning that lives somewhere inside of them? It's just that they don't have contact with it. No.
they they have to answer the questions disconnected from the extended self. They have to, who am I? I'm a doctor. No, who am I? What am I? What am I doing here? And who cares? And you might say, I don't know who I am. I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't know who cares. Well, that's a good start.
Yeah.
So you begin to look at your evidence. Who cares? Who shows you? But before you can accept that, you have to own those things. So, and who am I? Who am I without the VP? Who am I without my partner? What am I doing here without the VP? Who am I? What am I doing here without my partner? And who cares without my partner or without my job? And then you begin to look at what is the terrain to build those three things.
And what we're actually getting at, if you manage to work with those things, is that you build an incredible resilience.
Yes.
Because if you know who you are and you know why and you know who cares, I mean, you can stand you can stand in a storm.
Yes, and that's where centenarians come in. Centenarians do things in a very
Mario, I just want to tell the listeners before you carry on that Mario did a lot of research on hundreds of centenarians meaning people who are more than 100 years old. And he did this research all over the world. So he knows how these people got to get to that kind of age. Carry on.
Well, okay, so yeah, centenarians have a different way, although they have different cultures, they have some universal way of looking at themselves. They have something that my mentor, George Solomon, called healthy narcissism. It's necessary to have healthy narcissism because our cultures teach us pseudo humbleness. I love your hair. I haven't washed it in 3 days. Oh, that's a nice blouse. Oh, it's old. So you have to kill. So what happens? You don't experience gratitude. And gratitude is very important for immunological health. So you're taught to deny. You're a little girl and you, oh, mommy, look how smart I am. No, 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 never say that. Wait till people tell you and then you can deny it. So you get pseudo humbleness. They have healthy narcissism. Number one, they think everybody loves them. And when you tell them, there was a 102-year-old woman that I said to her, "You're so beautiful." She said, "Yes, I know. I've always been beautiful ever since I was a little girl." See how
That's
refreshing that is?
wonderful. It's
And they
wonderful.
don't care. And you see it and you, oh, how it's not selfish. If it's a gift and you want to have an opportunity to be grateful for that gift, that's one thing. And the other is that they do things, and when they do something, they think that people love them. I went to Cuba to do some work there with centenarians, and they gave a little party for the centenarian after I did all my ethnographic kind of stuff and all that. And he comes up to me, and there were a lot of women. They said, "Have you noticed how the women are looking at me? They're in love with me." And that sounds delusional, but you see, a sociopath would say that. They're beautiful. I'm going to manipulate them. But they have inclusive narcissism, which means, next he said, "Did you notice how beautiful they are? Look how beautiful they are."
Yeah. Yeah.
He's sharing his narcissism, and that's healthy.
Yeah.
But
So
if you
he's
tell
not
people,
only saying they're all admiring me and they think I'm great. He's saying, look how beautiful they are. No, it
that's
goes
right.
both ways.
That's right. It's like
So
in the,
acknowledging yourself and acknowledging others.
exactly, like in, as you know, in Tibetan Buddhism, inclusive compassion. You include yourself in the compassion. If you don't include, it's manipulative.
Yeah.
You're doing it so you can look good. And the same thing here. So when you include yourself in that lovingness, you then have the ability to feel all the value of gratitude, all the value of generosity, all the higher emotions and cognitions that actually are really good for your immune system. So that's how they are. The selfing that they have is a selfing that says, I have great meaning. I have, and they don't live long to live long. They live long because of the way they live. They don't care about dying. They love life, but they're not afraid of life. And the other thing that's very good for the immune system is that they know how to prolong the perception of time. If you don't prolong this perception of time, not good for your health.
What does that mean exactly?
Well, for example, people, you ask somebody who's 70 and somebody who's 20, the one who's 20 say, how is time passing for you? Oh, it's forever. I can't wait to be 21. Da 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 da.
Yeah.
A 70-year-old, time is passing. I was 52 years ago, that kind of thing. And gerontologists incorrectly tell you that that's just how it is when you grow older. That's it. You know, they don't look at terrains. Why is it? Because what happens is that you have to have the curiosity effect. Curiosity reduces your sense of timing. It elongates time. When you're curious, the brain puts a lot of attention to it, and you feel like you have all the time in the world. When you curious, after 30, you've had your first marriage, your first making love, your first divorce, your first bankruptcy, whatever. Then later, it's a rerun. But
Yeah,
what happens with
and you lose your curiosity,
you
or
lose your
you can
curiosity,
lose it.
and centenarians don't lose it. If a centenarian doing the interview with you, oh, look at that ball lighting that you have back there, and you have to paint it constantly, and that is what keeps them thinking that they have all the time in the world, is not growing older.
Yeah.
So someone at 20 hasn't had the milestones of curiosity yet. They haven't been married, or they haven't done this, they haven't. So that prolongs the concept of time.
Yeah.
But if you are curious and you continue to have things, I asked a centenarian who had a I think I had in the book a vegetable garden, and I said, it looks really good. I said, wait till you see it in a couple of years.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
And
it's
he's
wonderful.
101.
Yeah, so you have to also believe that you're going to be around in 10 years time,
Yes,
and to be excited about life, no? To be
that's right.
excited about your vegetable garden, or anything, you know, to keep that spirit of wonder, to wonder in life.
Yes, the childlike wondering is very important, and they're very much like children in that sense. But they know how to set limits. They're not just out there to do service for everybody. They have a certain amount of if you ask them to do something, if they can do it, they'll do it. If they can't, they can't. I mentioned also,
Yeah.
these are classicals. I put them in the book, but for your audience, I asked another centenarian. I said, "Look, I'd like to talk to you. I'd like to learn some things from you. Could we meet Saturday?" He said, "Oh yeah, sure, Saturday." I said, 9 o'clock? No, I have tango lessons at 9 o'clock. At 2 o'clock will be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So
So
they set limits. They look after themselves.
yes,
Yeah. They don't just let themselves get rolled over by other people.
that's right. Caretakers don't have good health.
No, because they put themselves aside and give
Yes,
everything to other people. No.
that's right. Because it's not out of compassion; it's out of fear of not being loved
Yeah. Yeah.
at a deep level.
Yeah. So do you yourself, having spoken to all these centenarians and having heard and seen with your own eyes how they live and what makes them have that kind of longevity, do you yourself then try to cultivate those qualities?
Yes, and in the new book it'll be out probably next month. It's called The
Ah,
Phoenix Self in
yes.
Search of Methuselah. I'm
The
using
Phoenix
good
self
science.
in search of Methuselah.
Yes, and that is a fiction, but with good science. This man discovers in the secret Vatican library that Methuselah was not one person, but Methuselah was a group of people, and that you find that this group of people live for hundreds of years, and there are people around the world that are 300-400 years old, and then he is told that there are 5 attainments that you have to meet. Well, those 5 attainments, you may not live 300 years, but you're going to live a long time if you meet those attainments.
Yeah.
So that's the idea.
Yeah.
One of the things that I do, if I'm doing a workshop, for example, I
Yeah.
practice healthy narcissism. Somebody will say, "What you just said was brilliant." I said, "You're right, it was brilliant." And they say, "Wait a minute." They go, I said, no, it was brilliant because we're co-authoring brilliance. For you to see it, you have to be brilliant with me. And they go, "Okay." So you give them permission. So when I start a group, I'll say, "How many people here are," and I do it in countries when I work with organizations, I'll say, "How many people here are good parents? How many people here are honest?" And I keep going, "How many people here are beautiful?" And they kind of look around to see if it's okay to say it.
Yeah.
"How many people here are bright?" And they look around, except the Germans. You can't stop the Germans. Okay, that's enough. But anybody else in the Philippines, you ask them and they go around for questions. At the end of the workshops, I'll ask, "Okay, how many people here are beautiful?" And they go, "Me."
Yeah. Yeah.
That's very important. If you don't see that in yourself, how can you give it? How can you accept the value of who you are? You're living in constant within the pale. In some of the Scandinavian countries, you can't go. You have to be equal to everybody and even less than everybody. In Japan, they say the nail that sticks out gets hammered.
Yeah.
In the United States, they say the squeaky wheel gets the oil.
Yeah.
So they have these things, individualists and so forth. But even in the United States, which is a very individualist country,
Yeah.
they still suppress greatness. You have to be great by other people telling you you're great. But if you say you're great, forget it. You're a narcissist or you're conceited, and they knock you immediately.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's very interesting. This I'm always I love the concept that you use in your book about co-emergence.
yes,
Because you were saying, for example, in that workshop where somebody says, "Oh, it's so brilliant what you're saying." They say that to you, and you go, "Yeah, I know, isn't it?" And you don't mean, and you say, "But it's a co-relationship here. It's not that I'm brilliant just in and of myself. It's a co-emerging."
that's right. And that's the other thing that I'm bringing into science. Science has 2 causalities. What are the causes of things? Upward causality and downward causality. Upward causality would be you go from the simplest to the most complex. That's what medicine does. You got a problem, you go to the bottom, you go to the organ, you go to the cell, you go to the upward. Downward causalities go from the more complex to the least, and that's more like the alternative. Consciousness is everything. Both are necessary but not sufficient.
Yeah.
So what I'm bringing in is a contextual co-emergence. Things co-emerge in a context. Things don't come one from the other, they co-emerge.
Yes.
So if someone says, "You're so stupid," I'll say, "Do you want to co-author that with me?"
Yeah.
Am I being a mirror for you?
Exactly.
So they
Yeah.
can actually see that this is a co-authoring.
Yeah.
And also you want to get people to own up what they're saying. So if somebody says, you're dumb. Oh, really? Okay, what makes me dumb? Rather than you don't defend yourself, because what you're saying is it's a perception that someone has, and you co-author it or not.
Yeah.
If you want to, you co-author. If you don't, you don't.
Yeah. But that's also when you think about relationships and so on, or just beauty. I
Yeah.
mean, as you're saying, we co-author these things. If we want to have beauty in a relationship, or we want to feel beautiful ourselves, or want to feel worthy, if I want to feel worthy, I have to make you feel worthy too.
That's right.
There's no way I can feel worthy if I'm trying to bring you down.
That's right. or to just bring that person up and you bring yourself down.
Yeah, that's no
Because
good either, of course.
it's an inequity. It's incoherent.
Yes,
In
and
many
it's not
relations.
true worthiness for the other either.
No, exactly. It's not. It's based on, let me tell you how beautiful you are so you won't leave me.
Yeah, yeah. It's built on an expectation or on a manipulation of trying to get something.
Yeah, based on fear.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. This is it's extremely interesting, your work. I really hope that many people will go and get this book or other books of Mario Martinez, because there's so much to learn, and we cannot, before I am aware of the time, so much of what we're talking about is about beliefs, about what we believe about things, and what I believe that the menopause means. Or another example you have is what rain means. If your mother always tells you that when you go out in the rain, you're going to get a cold, then you're going to, every time it rains, you're going to go, oh no, I'm going to get a cold. Whereas you can think rain is beautiful. It nourishes the plants and everything. So this is all about beliefs. And we cannot talk about beliefs without talking about limiting beliefs.
Yes.
So how do we work with limiting beliefs? How do we identify them? Because often we have them and we don't even know that they are limiting beliefs.
Yeah, well, biocognition is more field theory, so it has horizons. It doesn't have boundaries. So you have horizons of beliefs. So, for example, let's talk about the rain. You go out in the rain, and your mother says, "Don't go out in the rain because you'll catch a cold." There's no magical thing about it. What's happening is that you learn that rain means danger. The immune system picks up danger as secreting hormones of stress, and that suppresses the immune system. You go out with suppressed immune function, and you'll catch the cold or whatever's going on. Your mother said, "I told you." Also, when you go out into a cold, very cold, unless you're used to it, unless you're from your area, your immune system suppresses, and you can catch a cold. But if you go in the water and ice water and you're used to it, it's fine. So you have to have horizons. But the way to test the horizon is that if you say, I'm going out to the rain right. I'm going out in the rain right now. So you go out in the rain and you go just for 2 minutes and come back and say, okay, now what am I feeling now? You see, you're playing out the game. Well, I'm feeling that my mother tells me that I'm going to feel sick. Do I feel sick now? No. What's going on with my body? And you teach the terrain and then gradually go out more and more and more. That's how you deal with, it's not only desensitization, it's recontextualizing the meaning of a context.
Yeah, it's reteaching your whole body what something means.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then what you do is you then imagine yourself being out there and feeling the, because you can imagine and it'll be just as good. Imagine and feeling the fear of your mother. And where do you feel the fear? Then you imagine yourself going out there and seeing people that don't get sick. And how do you feel when you don't get sick? So it's a recontextualizing the embodiments that you learned.
Yeah. And you get a new empowerment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So before we end, you know that my podcast is called Intimacy with the World. You know, I wanted to call it Intimacy with Truth, but then I thought, no, truth is just way too big a concept, and who knows? So I changed it. So I wanted to ask you, Mario, what does intimacy with the world, that phrase, what does that mean to you? What does it evoke in you?
I think familiarity, because we have alterity, and you know, in anthropology, alterity is the otherness. You have otherness of the unknown, but when you become familiar with something, then there's an intimacy, there's a connection. You share things that you wouldn't share with someone else. So So you want to be intimate with the world, but know yourself within the world, not you and the world, because you'll never have intimacy. You'll always have alterity and otherness.
Yeah.
So intimacy is really familiarity.
Yeah. And this almost brings us full circle, you know, Mario, because you started the interview by talking about uncertainty, that how humans have such difficulty with the uncertainty, and that's what we need to become familiar with, that the
Yes,
world is uncertain, and that's okay.
that's right. And understanding the dynamics of uncertainty. So I'll just give you that to finish it. I guess uncertainty has parameters. It has but the compass of uncertainty is chaotic. So what happens with uncertainty? Number one, the three levels. One is uh, something is simple. Uncertainty comes in and simple. It means that you immediately can go to the cause.
Yeah.
Okay, so it starts raining. Okay, you know it's a rain, you put on a raincoat. That's it. That's uncertainty because things change. Uncertainty is a breakdown of expectations.
Yeah.
Okay, so then that's simple. Complicated means that it's more difficult to find the cause, but you can find it. Complex means no, there's no relationship between cause and effect. So what you do with the first two is you look for cause. With the third word, you cannot look for cause, you observe rather than confirm.
Yeah.
Because it'll have pockets of certainty.
Yeah.
And you go into pockets of certainty knowing that it's not going to last. Like in traffic, for example, the best example is you're in LA and it's 6 lanes and it's traffic is terrible. That's pretty complex. The cause started maybe 2 days before when somebody woke up late, and so all kinds of
Yeah.
things. You
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
know the cause. So you look for segments of certainty. You look at the 6 lanes, and you ask yourself, which is moving faster for a while? And you go to that lane. And then you know that it ends, and you go to, so you get segments of certainty. And gradually, you move faster than anybody else. But you also navigate using different rules. I'm going to observe. I'm going to observe. And if I find a nice little restaurant in between, I'll stop and I'll have a cappuccino. You know,
Yeah,
that
so
kind of.
you kind of open your mind and use that curiosity again, right?
Yes,
Okay, I'm in a situation that I intuitively don't like because it's too uncertain. I can't figure this out. Okay, can I just calm down and use my, as you say, observe and be curious and see what I can make with this?
that's right. You have to move from confirming to observing. You can't
Yeah,
confirm anymore. Observing only,
yeah, yeah,
and observing familiarity.
yeah,
So when
yeah,
your brain feels familiar, it settles down.
yeah. So when your new book comes out, Mario, I'm gonna have to read that, and we're gonna have to have another conversation, you know?
I'll send you a copy. Right.
Yeah, I was actually supposed to be in America right now, but with this COVID situation and everything, it's impossible
Well,
to
I'm in
travel.
Nashville, so if you come to Nashville, come and visit.
I will let you know for sure. And the same if
All
you
right.
come to Spain.
Of course, yeah. I love Granada, so I might do that.
Yeah. So I really hope that all of you enjoyed this episode with Dr. Mario Martinez. And thank you so much for listening to Intimacy with the World podcast with me, Dorita Holm. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast or on YouTube. And please like and leave a comment. This all helps me greatly to continue these empowering conversations. Thanks again, and see you all next week with a new episode. Be well, everybody.